Vladimir Borisovich, what do you think regarding the future composition of the State Duma, the configuration there? I think it's roughly clear now what will change. Like this 3-day voting system, right? Can it actually change anything for the people in our country? For the people? Not for Putin, not for the deputies who will get a seat there, yeah, but for the people.
Well, look, there was a TV series, but it wasn't about those people. The Sleepers, I think I haven't watched it. Well, the plot.
The Sleepers, yes.
I understand that, yes. That they're like agents, foreign agents, right?
Foreign agents. No need to sugarcoat it.
They, infiltrated, right? And then they woke up. Well, I'll tell you now, right now you're electing 450 sleepers.
Mm-hmm.
They'll all be for the war, for all the good, for everything bad against everything good. They'll be for you and for you. The problem is that these are sleepers. Their main goal is to get in there. And as long as Karabas Barabas, who pulls the strings, is alive and well, they'll be ordinary puppets, and there's nothing to expect from them. But then imagine the puppets remain, but the strings have snapped. And it turns out that artificial intelligence has taken them over. They mostly all live there with artificial intelligence anyway. You know, it's like a drone that's no longer guided by an operator, but identifies targets as it goes. And that's when they'll all start behaving in the most unpredictable way. And in that sense, this configuration actually matters. So I wouldn't be analyzing them now based on how they'll vote for the next stripping of foreign agents' rights, opening access to those, housing offices. It's clear how that will go. But I would analyze them based on how they'll act when the strings are cut. And you know what's funny? That these silly things, like a legitimate body of power, at that moment, it will actually turn out to be a body of power. While, for example, Kirienko might turn out to be absolutely nobody.
You don't say.
Because,
well, he really said it, right? And as you said before, could one have even imagined such a thing?
Yes, and I'll explain it to you. Look, if you really want to understand the situation, the thing is this. All of these top-level officials essentially fall into just two distinct categories. There are those who rely entirely on their own personal resources, and then, on the other hand, there are those who simply project Putin's resources instead. Take, for instance, Belousov today. He still kind of relies, well, to the extent that he's mastered it, and he's actually the most interesting person to me. He relies on the army's resources. If he, let's say, doesn't fall out with Gerasimov, who is even closer to that army, then that's a force right there. In an extreme situation, he, like Zhukov, could move some tank division, wherever he wants, whether it's needed or not. And Zolotov, despite the fact that we don't really count him as a person, so to speak, nevertheless, he has resources.
What do you mean we don't? I know him. We're personally acquainted.
Well, I just don't hear about him. He's just not heard from.
Oh, he's not heard from, right? The National Guard head, still unheard from.
He sits quietly, unheard, but bayonets remain, reflecting a structure where a vassal's vassal is not one's own. So whoever comes in as the formal, future president, he says to Zolotov, I want your divisions to go to, say, Novosibirsk. And he says, and what's in it for me? As the saying goes, I gave an order. He says, and who are you? You see, that's the conversation, yeah. Well, Kolokoltsev, despite everything, well, while he's in his place, before him are those often unloved by the people, but nevertheless ubiquitous policemen of ours. That's a resource, I get it. Well, as for that shady outfit, I'm not even going to discuss it. And then there's the presidential administration.
Now you're reasoning like Stalin. How many divisions does the Pope have? Kirienko has no divisions. Sobyanin has no divisions. Siluanov has no divisions. Manturov has no divisions.
Look, Sobyanin has them. Sobyanin even has divisions in the subway system. And who knows what else he has tucked away. So Sobyanin, or really any regional boss, has his own resources. Right? And Moscow is no small matter, let me tell you. So Sobyanin has resources, but Kirienko's resources are borrowed. His resource is the ability to influence the emperor's mind, so the emperor keeps all those mentioned above in line. And as long as our emperor is someone who can keep everyone in line, Kirienko might have more power than the rest of them, though he's losing some now, of course. But what if not? What if he's not? Well, let's say Kirienko has only one power then, the power of the fox. I mentioned the power of the fox, meaning he has to make a deal with this one against that one, set someone up. Well, Khrushchev won under those conditions. You see, Khrushchev managed to come out on top under those specific difficult conditions, but we have to remember that not everyone is a Khrushchev. So when we look at all these challenging circumstances, when the strings finally break and the situation unravels, we are suddenly left with 450 men who are completely on their own, forced to fend for themselves without any guidance or support. They can actually pass laws. Then they'll remember they can pass laws. It'll be interesting. We should look at what's next, not what's now. Well, I have this gut feeling that we might elect a Duma now that outlasts this regime. You know, we ourselves.
A transitional Duma. Transitional Duma. Wait a second. And then these elections actually make sense. Now, Maxim Katz said today that he's strictly against the boycott. He thinks it's the wrong move. And you?
Look, I've spoken about this many times.
The situation is changing, so I can. Are you changing?
Yes, look, the situation has changed 3 times already. Meaning, we see what we discussed, a huge demand from people to go and express their will. And when Yabloko was there was truly the only right moral answer. There's an anti-war force, the government stupidly put it on the ballot themselves. Go and express it. Now, the demand to express one's will remains, but there's no moral answer. What's left is the answer given by the FPK, smart voting. Go and vote for troglodyte number 2 then, because it's still better than troglodyte number 1. And as for troglodyte number 2 and troglodyte number 1 being the same troglodyte, we'll just turn a blind eye to that. That answer seems immoral to me, so I'm falling back to the position I held in all previous elections. Go there, take the ballot, and destroy it.
Valeria actually asks, wait, why exactly 450 men? There are plenty of women there too, you know? Ooh, you are really in for it now, aren't you? That is definitely going to be a tough one to explain.
Yeah.
You're in for it now.
There was supposed to be a different word there, but, well, it got changed to men. On the contrary, I didn't even want to involve women in this mess.
Valeria, it's not sexism. Valeria, it's respect and preservation.
It is really just like, as the singer Slepakov would often sing, it is essentially Aesopian language.
Aesopian, I'd say, yes.
Yes.
Yes, here Mikhail G says 7 old men and 1 girl. Yes. The girl is Tereshkova, our wonderful cosmonaut Valentina Tereshkova. So Vladimir Borisovich, you're basically giving a timeline for the current power structure based on absolute yes. You're saying, oh, it's the autumn of the patriarch. So not even 5 years will pass before something changes for us. You said that. No, you said that. I said it.
No.
No, yes?
Listen, I think you are immediately turning these probabilistic constructions into absolute ones, and frankly, you are turning them into absolute commands. It is important to recognize that distinction. That's for Professor Solovey. I can say with a very high degree of probability that looking ahead in the years 2027, 28, and 29, we are going to see some significant changes.
Mom?
Several completely different lines, and not even concerning Russia, will lead to the formation of a perfect storm situation for Russia. This is, we don't know what will happen in the Middle East, but it can't go on like this forever. These are major elections in Europe with a paradigm shift. And it's not necessarily true that a shift from a left-wing to a right-wing paradigm will be good for Putin. That's not necessarily the case at all. In any case, it's a shock and a departure from the usual environment, which rigid systems like Putin's usually don't handle well. These are the elections in America. So these are all external circumstances, you see, which...
Well, that's important too, Vladimir Borisovich.
Yes, but it's part of this perfect storm. Next. We understand that Putin can ignore the new style of war proposed by Zelensky for a while, but then he can't ignore it forever. So I can fully imagine living like that for 6 months, pretending that nothing is happening in the country. But after 6 months, you must either compromise, which is deadly for the regime, or escalate the situation in some very harsh way. First of all, by starting at least a hybrid war in Europe, and that takes us into a completely different dimension. So certain things are building up. Plus, you and I talked about how the system will inevitably become harsher, more repressive, and so the cost of a mistake will grow. So, in my understanding, of course, Putin is a lucky man, but Putin has already made two radical mistakes that have backed him into a corner of corners. The first radical mistake, in my view, he made by starting this war. So let's be honest, it's a mistake. If he knew everything he knows today, he would never have made that decision. That's the reality. Yes, he's putting on a brave face in a losing game. Yes, he basically imposes his will on the apparatus. Yes, he managed to catch a certain trend of even the popular will, but he would never have made this decision if he knew where it would lead. And the second mistake, also a mistake, is that, from my point of view, he took an extra card into the negotiations with Trump. He won't really be forgiven for this either. Since he's only human, the chance of a mistake is high. So I believe there's a high probability that this is indeed a transitional Duma, because it will have to take the helm right when, as I see it, the time for this perfect storm arrives.